All right, so spawning a thread means you are creating a second line of execution within a program. Okay, so it happens within a single process. Forking a process creates a secondary program at the operating system level. All right, so what impact does that have on CPU scheduling? Well, with a thread, the threads are sharing the amount of CPU time allocated to the program that spawned them. For a forked process, they're getting their own allocated CPU time. So they're kind of getting a
cuts in line.
More. They're getting more. One program's getting more CPU time than it would have otherwise gotten if it had done the thread version of itself. Make sense? Okay, so let's try to get through this slide set today. Hopefully we can do that. We talked a little bit about storage management last time. Everything kind of gets created around this concept of a file. Files are stored inside of things called directories. These are all things that we're familiar with, right? But think about that level of abstraction that lives above the actual storage medium. You know, different storage mediums we're used to dealing with. We have magnetic hard drives, and those come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. We talked about the difference in RPMs last time, right? Faster access times. We talked about some examples of what if you're copying something to, you're copying two separate files to a hard drive at once. It slows way down because it has to give a little bit of time to each of those copying files. So a good rule of thumb might be in the future, if you want to copy two large files to a hard drive, either start the copying at the same time, so it all happens under one scheduler, or once you get one copying, let it finish, and then start the second one copying. Total amount of time to copy will be less than, assuming you can hang out. You know, if one file is going to take 15 minutes to copy and you need to leave, well, then you might as well get the second one copying at the same time. But even though it'll take longer, total amount of time, you're not there to experience it. Kind of make sense? Otherwise, they will copy faster if you do them one at a time. Similarly, we also saw, or we talked about, one large file will copy more quickly than the same amount of data being copied out of a directory over across 1,000 files, let's say. Because each time we're copying that, a bunch of stuff has to happen to create new subdirectories, create new files, and then copy the data into those files. Does that make sense? We think of the concept of copying as being trivial, but the reality is it's about creating new and then filling it up with the same crap that was in the original. Make sense? Okay. And we're used to dealing with directories and files no matter what kind of storage mediums we're dealing with. It's a hard drive, it's a solid state drive, it's a USB stick. They all contain directories and files. Okay. So when we talk about file system management, these are algorithms used to organize the directories and files on a hard drive. So what are some file systems that you're familiar with? Throw out a couple of examples. When you format your hard drive for Windows or for Mac, typically it asks you how do you want to format this? A couple different file systems you have to choose from. Well, what's the modern file system that Windows machines use? NTFS, New Technology File System, FS, file system. Okay, what was the previous one? That's typically the one that's used in USB drives and USB sticks. FAT32. File allocation table 32. 32-bit file allocation table. What's the difference between those two? NTFS and FAT32. And then to take it one step further, why when you buy a USB drive, Mr. Quiz?
Sorry, I was at work.
Were you? At 10 in the morning, you were at Little Caesars?
I was at work at 7:15 in the morning.
What do you do at Little Caesars at 7 in the morning?
Crap.
We have like 100 pizzas that go out right now.
Oh my gosh.
I eat pizza for breakfast.
Well, yeah, but I was just
Not even for
thinking,
breakfast, that was like for school's lunches.
oh my gosh. School's lunches?
Yeah.
They're serving pizza at schools. I see all these news reports about they want to have healthy eating.
Yeah, Congress declared pizza a vegetable so they could still serve it at schools.
Makes sense. That's almost worth a free pass on the quiz. Not quite, but almost. All right, so why is it that our USB hard drives or jump drives come pre-formatted FAT32? We can certainly reformat it to NTFS, right? But why do they come pre-formatted FAT32?
Is it faster for them to format it that way?
Nope. How many of you have a jump drive? It's the little USB sticky things, right? Do I have one? Yeah. Here's my jump drive right here. My keychain.
Mine's cooler. It's a gorilla drive.
Huh?
You can go underwater for like 60 feet.
Why would you need to bring it underwater at 60 feet?
You know, I do all my scuba diving with my jump drive.
60 feet below sea level, and hold on, let me check my email.
You don't check your email with a jump drive. It's a bad example.
I just got here.
No quiz for you.
I only get one day.
I assume everybody got that reference from Soup Nazi.
Yes, Nazi.
Never seen?
Oh my
Gosh.
god.
Seinfeld, the Soup Nazi.
Hold on.
There's actually a restaurant down on the south side that's based off of it. It's called, and this is south side of Milwaukee, and they actually make really, really good homemade soup. And the place is called Soup Otzi. But in the place, they have a Otzi is the family's last name, so it's kind of it's tongue in cheek, I guess. But they have a signed picture of the actual guy who played the Soup Nazi in the show. The Soup Nazi in Seinfeld was this dude who ran this little soup stand for lunch in New York, and he had awesome soup. But there was a specific algorithm for ordering, and if you didn't follow the algorithm, you wouldn't get soup. They take it back. So you had to go through. You pick the soup, then you pick the bread, and sometimes you didn't get bread, and George complained. It's like, you want bread? Yes, please. No soup for you.
Let go.
How do we get on to Soup Nazi from this? What was this?
No quiz
Huh?
for you.
No quiz for you, that's right. So, in any case, somebody was about to tell me why all your USB drives. Remember, I'm trying to educate you so you don't get taken advantage of at Best Buy. Because sometimes when you go to Best Buy, you know how they have on the boxes for USB drives, they sometimes have the one that says Mac compatible. It's $20 more. You seen those? It's a true story. Next time, look. If you go into a place and they have seemingly the same product, but it has the little Mac compatible picture on it, usually it's the $20 more for the same thing. So why is it that these USB drives or the jump drives are pre-formatted FAT32?
Because it can be either one, Mac or PC.
Okay, tell me more about that. What would happen if I plugged an NTFS? It means it will plug in. What would happen if I plugged an NTFS formatted USB drive into a Mac? Wouldn't be able to read it. It actually can read it, can't write it. Yeah, it can't write it. NTFS is a proprietary format that Microsoft does not open. Some places have reverse engineered it. How many of you are Linux users in here? Okay. So if you've noticed, you can compile NTFS support into the Linux kernel, and it always has in parentheses next to it experimental. Use at your own risk is the concept there, because it's not an open algorithm. Microsoft doesn't allow people to know exactly how NTFS works. So places that support it have kind of sort of reverse engineered it. But the Hackintosh operating system by default doesn't allow you to write to an NTFS drive because it's considered to be dangerous. You might corrupt the whole drive. So that's why those machines come, the USB sticks and the USB hard drives come stock formatted FAT32 because they'll work on both machines. So why don't we just use FAT32 for everything?
There's a 4 gigabyte.
Ah, did you run into that at some point when you were downloading one of your illegal movies?
No, I read that when I was buying an external hard drive. I think.
Oh, you read it. Anybody experienced the 4 gigabyte limit? Maybe when you were downloading a video game ISO or something? Raise your hand if you're lying. So FAT32, while it's compatible with both sides, has a single file size limit of 4 gigabytes, which was plenty big historically, right? We rarely had single files bigger than 4 gigabytes. Today we get 4 gigabytes. I mean, how big, if you're going to download, say, an Xbox 360 ISO, how big is that file?
Why would I want to download it?
Well, I'm sure several of you know exactly how big that file. Fine, a PS3 ISO. Most of them are based on Blu-ray or HD, something or other. So probably at least 8 gigabytes. At least. You might even have 12 and 16 gigabyte ISOs. You can't put that file, you can't put it on a FAT32 drive, even if it's a 1 terabyte drive. Plenty of space, but you can't actually allocate a file that's that big. Make sense? So that's a weakness of FAT32 by today's standards. But NTFS solves it, as does the file system for the Mac. Anybody know what the file system on the Mac is? It's HFS. It's a hierarchical file system, kind of came from Unix. We have a couple of different file systems, but kind of the popular file system types are this type called journaling file systems. So the file system on the Mac, which it's not that Apple invented it. It came from Unix. It's a Unix file system, UFS. And then they have an HFS, which is hierarchical. It's a journaling version of that. The whole idea of journaling means you can roll it back without, you have a better chance of recovering data upon a file system error. So it's hopefully less corruptible. Make sense? That's just kind of what the new kids are doing. It's not a Mac thing. It's a modern day file system thing. For our Linux user, typically when you get to notice this the most with Linux, I think, the different file systems. When you install Linux and it's asking you how you want to format the machine, you usually have a choice of about 5 or 6 or 7 stock different file systems. And they're all journaled file systems, but they have a whole bunch of different ones that we didn't just discuss. Okay, so there's plenty of file systems out there. They're just programs. There's in Linux, it's a huge open source community. So there's people who write all sorts of different things, CPU schedulers for the kernel, because the Linux kernel, that operating system, is an open source project that anybody can contribute to. It might not make it into the final version that gets agreed upon, but you could still write it. So in any case, these different file systems are just written by people. And what's a file system? It's an algorithm for writing files and organizing directories on a hard drive. And the features of it should be fast, should be accurate, and we should probably be able to roll back from corruption. That's where the journaling file systems come in. All right, so these USB drives and the jump drives, when they come stock with a FAT32 file system, it's so they will out of the box work on any machine. Because they all support FAT32 because it's an open standard. NTFS is not. There's no reason why you can't format a USB drive or a jump drive for NTFS. Then just work on PCs. Is that a big deal? No, it's just a limitation, right? If all your machines are PCs and you're only going to be moving that hard drive or that jump drive between PCs, you might as well get rid of that 4 gigabyte file size limit. Right? NTFS is probably the superior file system from a performance perspective and a security perspective and a data, I guess a data corruption perspective. It's the better file system. It's a newer file system, but it's not compatible with both platforms. So if you're moving between multiple machines, you want FAT32 by today's standards. If you are just using a PC, NTFS makes the most sense. If you're just using the Mac, HFS makes the most sense. Because it also has that feature where you don't have a 4 gigabyte file size limit.
Is there a problem with the drives that, because my Mac won't use the encrypted drives.
Well, give me some more information. You mean the encrypted jump drives?
Yes. The encryption will not work on that. Is that a FAT32 thing?
I actually doubt it. It's got to be because the encryption side of things has nothing to do with the file system. It has more to do with how the data is stored on the. So the actual data stored on the FAT32 partition would be encrypted data, and built into the drive should be a hardware encryptor and decryptor, which then moves back and forth. But if the USB drive is written, if it's, I don't know if it. I don't know a lot about the encrypted drives, but my thought process here is that if you're building them, you can build them in one of two ways. One of them is you have the built-in encryption hardware that's part of the USB drive. I would think that would work on any machine. The other one would be that it has some sort of software built into the USB where it utilizes an existing encryption algorithm that came with the operating system. And if that's the case, I could see maybe the Mac not supporting that encryption algorithm, or at least maybe by default, but it's built into the PC. Because everything that gets stored on there is going to filter through that encryption algorithm before it gets stored. Because ultimately you're storing encrypted data. So my guess is that would be the argument, but it's really just it's not just a flat out guess. I'm trying to come off some sort of it's an educated guess, I guess. Which? Two. So I guess that's what I have to say on that. Now, historically, when you went into Best Buy and you bought one of those USB drives that had the, you go in there and they have let's just talk about Western Digital external USB drives. We have our Best Buy employee here, right? So you can explain this stuff to us. Okay. Well, you sell computers, right? Oh, you don't. So on Friday you'll start taking advantage of people. Right. All right. Okay. So I come in and I'm shopping for one of those external Western Digital drives. And they go back there and what do they have? They have the Home and the Home Premium, and some of them are in a green box and some of them are in a blue box. And what's the difference between all those? Besides price. Space. No, both of these are 2 gigabytes, but one's in a green box and one's in a blue box and one's $30 more. Why? You're going to be selling these on Friday. What the heck?
I don't know if the box relates to the actual drive, but like the green drives are more energy efficient, and then the blue drives, I don't know what they do, but I just know the green ones are more energy efficient and they're less in price.
Shouldn't more energy efficient be more in price?
No, because the speeds on them aren't as fast.
Okay, so one difference could be 5,400 RPM versus 72, right? Okay, so now we're going to go from the blue box to the black box. The one that's even $40 more. Both of them are 7,200 RPM drives. What's the difference? Do you get a commission on this?
No.
No commission. So do you care if I buy the one that's $40 more? So which one? Are you going to recommend the cheaper one just because it's cheaper? It's the same drive on the inside. Both of them are 7,200 RPM drives. Both of them are 2 terabyte drives. Why am I going to pay $40 more for this one than this one? Because the picture, Mac compatible? What does that mean? I just use that as an example, the Mac compatible thing. There's actually a couple other things that drive up price, a couple other pictures. What's the Mac compatible thing? Is it going to have the Hackintosh file system on it instead of FAT32?
No, that says it's Mac compatible and Windows.
So you're paying for the picture.
Yeah.
It's still going to be formatted FAT32. Is that worth $40, the picture? We all keep the box, right? So what's the difference? How many of you have bought an external USB hard drive before? Several of you. What did you base your decision on? Color of box? Price? So if both of them said 2 terabytes on them, you just buy the cheaper one? Well, we've learned in here that RPMs make a big difference, right? In fact, we've even said that the speed of the hard drive is likely one of the biggest beneficiary things for your computer. Now, mostly we're talking about the internal drive, correct? What's the difference between an internal hard drive and an external USB drive? Besides that, are they the same kinds of drives or are they a little different?
You get a pretty plastic coating around the external.
Yeah, the external drive is actually inside something else. It comes prepackaged in something else. Shouldn't that cost even more? Inside that box, are they the same drive or are they actually a little different? Are those external drives, are they actually a slightly different product? The actual hard drive part of it? Could you buy an external drive and rip that plastic box open and then take whatever inside and plug it into the inside of your computer? Evan, answer my question. I'm shopping at Best Buy. Help me, I'm stupid.
You said you were never wrong.
Well, I'm going to be more right than him in this case. Hence the reason I'm teaching a lesson to the Best Buy guy that's going to try to take advantage of people. Actually, in all fairness, you're not going to try to take advantage of people. You just are going to take advantage of people out of ignorance. Right? So can I buy this external drive and then rip it open and put that drive inside my computer? Will it work? No opinions?
I don't think it will.
Anybody think, why don't you, do you have a reason why you don't think it will, or just kind of a gut, your gut feeling says it won't work?
No, it's definitely something that says now that it would work.
Same drives. Work just fine. Tear it open, pull the hard drive out of there, plug it in the inside of your computer. Exact same drive. Or it'll work just fine.
Because the connection is different.
Oh, tell me about that.
Because one of them is the external hard drives, they don't have the same type of connectors that an internal one does. So would the USB be different than, say, a connector you would use for internal?
Well, an internal drive, by today's standards, is usually going to be a serial ATA interface, right? Well, inside of that external USB hard drive, you're going to have a little board. If you ever ripped one open, you'll have a normal hard drive, and then you'll have a little silicon board. And on one end of that silicon board is what? USB plug. The other end of the silicon board will be what? Serial ATA plug. Just goes between the two. Same drive. So, that's that side of the coin. Now, what about the price difference between the green box, the blue box, and the black box? I'm just assuming those are the colors of the boxes. So the blue box and the black box in our example both have 7,200 RPM drives. In fact, I'm telling you, they both have the identical hard drive in them. They're both 2 gigabyte, Western Digital, 7,200 RPM, blah, 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 blah. The exact same hard drive that I could rip out of there, put into my computer, and it will work identically. They are literally the same drive. Why am I going to pay $30 more for one of them than the other? What do I get?
They kind of USB 2.0,
Possibly. You could have USB 2.0 versus USB 3.0. Okay, but both of these support USB 3.0 in our example.
Could one come with software on it?
Could, probably not going to drive the price. They probably both have the Western Digital, hi, I'm the annoying software that automatically launches when you plug this in software.
They formatted specifically
Yeah,
for,
both FAT32.
I don't know.
Historically, when you had the ones that have the little Hackintosh picture on it, what was different between that one and the one that didn't have the Hackintosh picture? Any of you have an external hard drive that has more than one plug on the back of it? The cheaper ones typically are USB only. The ones that are Mac compatible historically usually had USB and FireWire. The more expensive ones today might dump FireWire because it's kind of fallen to the wayside. but they're probably going to be USB 3.0, and then they'll also have external serial ATA. Are you listening to this, Evan? What did I say? So no, you're not listening. You start Friday. I just gave you a lesson to not screw people over. And what do you do on your laptop? Farmville?
Not right now.
My Little Pony? What's the game? Huh? You checking your fantasy football? The more expensive drive is going to have more interface plugs. So you can hook it up between USB and usually they'll have eSATA, external serial ATA. What's going to be the difference between USB and external serial ATA? Interface speed. External serial ATA, eSATA, will be the same speed as if you had that plugged in inside your computer. So we have two different levels of speed here. It's the exact same argument we've been talking about with memory. You have the physical drive. How fast can it deal with stuff? How fast can it search the magnetic drive and find crap? And then you have the communication channel for sending stuff to it and retrieving stuff from it. USB 3.0 is slower than serial ATA. It's faster than USB 2. And it's a lot faster than USB 1. But it's still way slower than eSATA. So the more expensive drives have multiple options for how you can hook it to your computer. So maybe if you're at home and you have a machine that either A, already has an external serial ATA port, or B, you do the ghetto version of this, where you just take a little slot out of the back of it and you run an internal serial ATA cable out of your case and into the back of the thing. That would be the ghetto version of pulling off eSATA. Or you buy an internal expansion card that supports eSATA that has the plug-in on the back of it. So maybe at your home computer, you have that external drive hooked up through eSATA for performance. If you have it hooked up through eSATA, it's going to be just as fast as if that was an internal machine, internal hard drive. And that's a real perk, because usually what we're giving up when we deal with external hard drives is speed. We have portable capacity, but we give up a lot of speed. Well, now that drive that we maybe are using for our backup, or maybe we're using it just for storing our illegal movies, whatever it is, or we have it somehow streaming to our Xbox or our PS3, because that's where we stream our games off of that we've illegally downloaded. I don't know what you people are doing, but I'm just guessing. Oh, you guys are all criminals.
Well, I mean, as of yesterday, you're going to hell. So.
That's true. What was that from?
The rotating shaft.
Oh. That's right. So he's wondering, like, what? It was a computer organization thing. Oh, by the way, that email I had sent you?
Yeah.
I was totally recording the quiz in the wrong class. That's why I thought you were in that class.
Yeah, and then reaping.
Yeah.
Spawning.
Right. Reaping the shaft. And make sure that's your opening line when you sell your first printer or something like that. That's fine. All right, here's the next quiz question for Best Buy. Okay, I come into Best Buy, I want to buy a printer. And I say I need something that's full duplex. What does that mean? Did you have to pass a test or something like that to get this job?
Trainings first before I actually start.
All right, keep me posted about this training. I want to know. I want to know if they're training you on like details of stuff or like how to run the register. It's killing me. Full duplex means you can print on both sides. And he's probably going to be the smart one.
Yeah, then just with the same.
I know, it's garbage. All right, so
I don't care what he does.
on your home computer, you might have your external drive set up with eSATA, so it's fast. At that point, it'll be just as fast if it was plugged into the inside of your computer. The only difference is it's being powered by an external container. But then what you can do is you can unhook that, and you can take it with you, and everybody's computer is going to have USB, right? You can take it over to your buddy's house or something like that, and it'll work just fine. Because, even though they won't have an external serial ATA port necessarily, they'll have USB. The hard drive will act slower, not because the drive itself is slower, but the interface between it will be slower. But they'll still be able to get the data. That makes sense? So those more expensive external hard drives have multiple options for how do you interface with your computer. So if somebody's going to use it as a backup and they want it to be fast, you should sell them the more expensive one, not because it's more expensive, but because if you have an external serially ATA interface, the hard drive will operate at up to 6 gigabit per second. Fast, just like it's an internal hard drive. So it's a convenience. And that really comes into play when we deal with machines where it's very difficult to expand the internal hard drive. You know, like the highly compact like iMacs and Mac Minis and the equivalent from HP where it has the all-in-ones, that kind of stuff. Now Apple has a kind of a new technology. They've FireWire kind of lost, right? We've gotten rid of FireWire. What's Apple's new technology called for external devices? Huh? Thunderbolts. Thunderbolts. Just sounds awesome, right? Okay, we're going to have Thunderbolt hard. They already have some Thunderbolt hard drives. So Thunderbolt hard drives and Thunderbolt video cards and just Thunderbolt everything. We have Thunderbolt coffee makers. Hook it all up. And that's supposed to be super fast, faster than serial ATA. So before long, Apple's going to be using internal Thunderbolt to hook up the hard drives. You know, then things are really going to hit the fan because now what are you going to have? Now you're going to literally have to buy a different physical hard drive for your Mac than you are going to buy for the PC. So if you, well, not that you build a Mac, but if you're upgrading the hard drive in your iMac or in your Mac Pro or something like that, and you go and buy it right now, you just buy the hard drive with the right specs and the right price. The same drive. Doesn't matter if it's on a PC or a Mac. You know, so don't fall prey on Newegg when it says Mac compatible for $20 more. Same crap. It's the same crap. Okay? Actually, it's a slight lie. It's almost the same crap. I'll come back to, well, I'll just talk about that now. Do you know what the difference is between an internal serial ATA hard drive for the Mac and an internal serial ATA hard drive for the PC? It's a very similar argument to why you can install Windows on a Mac, but you can't install the Mac OS on a Windows machine without some interesting workarounds. What's the difference between those two drives? It has nothing to do with the physical drive, but that's true. You know, when I upgraded the hard drive in my iMac, first you got to take the screen off, and you do that with you're supposed to buy this special suction cup. I did it with a plunger. Because the whole front panel, the cover that goes on the screen is just magnets. There's no screws or anything. Just pull that thing right off. Then you get inside, there's a bunch of screws. And what's terrible about it is every single one of the screws is magnetized into the thing. So like if you get a little bit off, all of a sudden it gets sucked down in some crevice, not from gravity, but from magnetism. You're not retrieving that. So then you got to figure out what's like the bare minimum number of screws that you can take out to get to that internal hard drive. Because you have the LCD screen that's in there. And you know, when you watch all the videos on how you're supposed to do it, you're supposed to actually remove the LCD screen. What I did is I piled up a whole bunch of pillows. Because there's all these cables plugged in the back, but you can never get plugged back in. You know, there's just no way. So what you do is you just unscrew enough screws so you can lean it forward onto these pillows. And then you got to reach in behind and take out the hard drive. You put the new one in, getting the bare minimum number of screws into the thing. And then you close it all up, only putting some of the screws back in because you know you're not going to be able to get them all. Now you've installed a new hard drive. But what's the difference besides difficulty getting into the machine? The physical drive itself, what's the difference? This would be another good thing for a Best Buy person to know for any of those DIY people who come in and want to upgrade their Mac hard drives. If you go to Newegg or something, you buy a internal serial ATA, Western Digital, blah, 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 hard drive that doesn't specifically say it's for the Mac. You're going to plug it in. It's going to work just fine inside your Mac. After a few minutes, all of a sudden the fans in your Mac are just going to run at full speed. Full power. Not heat. there's a little sensor in the Hackintosh version of those hard drives that the serial ATA plug can carry some additional data. And that sensor senses the heat. And now that the Mac is reading from that sensor, it's constantly getting the bad response. So it just cranks the fans just in case.
As long as you put up with the fan sound.
Nah, there's a piece of software. You just download the software and just crank the fans back down. Done. One and done. It runs in the background. Don't have to worry about it. Okay, the software I think is related to the tool has something to do with solid state drives, like Mac SSD or something like that is the name of the tool that I use. You know, why should you pay $20 or $30 more for a hard drive when you can just get a 3 megabyte thing that just allows you to tune the fan? Garbage. Just complete garbage. Leave it to Apple to always have the weird workarounds. Especially today when we have, they're both running not running the same file system, but they're both running the same hardware. They're all Intel, right? So Microsoft Windows and the Mac OS are both pieces of software that were compiled to run on the Intel processor. Several of you in here have Macs, but several of you have PCs, right? Don't you feel that if your PC has an Intel processor in it, that you should be able to run the Mac OS if you wanted to? I mean, you might have to put up with some driver compatibility issues. One of the reasons the Mac OS is fairly stable is the same reason we give for why iOS works pretty well. Apple doesn't have to make it work for 1,000 different video cards. They have to make it work for the 4 video cards that they sell. So if you have a Mac Pro, which is kind of the upgradable Mac, when the latest, greatest $800 graphics card comes out, you can't just buy it and put it into your Mac Pro. It may not even boot because it might detect at the hardware level. But certainly, it's probably just going to run in stupid plain Jane VGA resolution because ATI and NVIDIA weren't able to write the drivers for it because Apple doesn't allow that. Apple writes their own drivers. Where with your machine, you've built this behemoth gaming machine. If a new graphics card comes out and you want it, you can eBay your current one, go out and buy the new one, stick it in, install the driver, and you're up and running with a new high-performance graphics card, right? Can't do that with a Mac. Operating system doesn't support it. It only supports the crap that Apple wants to sell you. Some people might say it's a disadvantage. That's the argument between open and premium, or open and proprietary. So kind of a interesting thing. So the way that Macs work is when you try to install Mac OS X, let's say, on a PC, the first thing it checks is for a very specific EEPROM, which is a hardware. It's the Hackintosh version of the BIOS piece of software that runs on the motherboard. And if it's not Mac, if it doesn't come back and say, yes, I'm a Mac, you're allowed to install, it won't install.
Wow.
That's the only reason it won't install in there. Once it installed, you might have some driver compatibility issues. Any of you ever used any of the projects like Hackintosh to put Mac OS on a PC? Nobody's tried to squeeze Mac OS on a PC in here? There's some projects out there, kind of the popular ones called Hackintosh. And it has some tools in it to allow you to bypass that to get the Mac OS to install. There's also a couple of things to allow you to install it in a virtual machine, like VMware or something like that. But then after you get past that, the problem becomes hardware compatibility. Sometimes some of your drives don't work. Sometimes your graphics card isn't performing at its full tilt. Doesn't support your keyboard. Stupid stuff like that. But hey, it's technically on there. is the point. So in any case, there's more than meets the eye than just the physical drive. There's all sorts of other things. So you remember all that, Evan, that you were paying attention to, just at least that portion when you sell stuff to people. Okay. All right, so here, this is some of the things that an operating system has to do: manage free space, where to store stuff on the hard drive, disk scheduling. So kind of the same crap we have to do with memory, we have to do with the hard drive, but on a larger scale. I'm going to copy this file from this USB drive to this hard drive. Where will I put it? And how do I store it? Chances are the hard drive is broken up into a bunch of little buckets. And hard drives are called blocks. In memory, they're called frames. Same crap. Memory is like a big array. Hard drives are like a bigger array. So what you have to do is you have to chop your file up into a whole bunch of little tiny pieces and put it on the hard drive. And it may be that you can't put all the pieces of one file next to each other. So we take this example of like your 3 gigabyte single file, like an ISO. So it's not a directory. You think 3 gigabytes of 100 kilobyte files in it. It's a single 3 gigabyte file. Well, chances are you're not going to, well, in a fresh hard drive you might, but let's just say, chances are you're not going to have 3 gigabytes of space contiguous on a hard drive. You're going to chop that file up into a whole bunch of block-sized chunks, whatever the size of a block is for that particular file system. It's one of the variables for a file system. So NTFS will use a certain block size. HFS will use another block size. FAT32 uses a different block size. So those are the potential. Block size is the size of an individual bucket on the hard drive. So you chop that file up into a whole bunch of block-sized pieces, and now you need to put them on the hard drive. And somewhere you need to keep track of where you put them. I put block 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here. I put block 6, 7, 8, 9 over here, and so on and so forth. How many of you have ever defragmented a hard drive? All right, so I walk into Best Buy. I'm like, oh, Evan, smart guy. I'm going to talk to Evan. My computer popped up and says I need to defragment my hard drive. What does that mean, Evan? Tell me, what does defragmenting mean?
You know what? I got an interview with Aurora today.
So you're on the fence with us? What are you doing, Aurora? Heart surgery? Seems like they'll just hire anybody these days for this crap. What is defragmenting? Besides something that takes 5 hours.
Bits. It like combines all of the bits basically.
So it looks at your hard drive and it sees that you have files all over the place on the hard drive. Defragmenting moves them, compresses them down into the first portion of the hard drive. Makes them closer together. Why is it advantageous to have things closer together on a hard drive? Runs faster. Why? Or at the very least, it doesn't have to go as far when it moves between files. Right? So we put them towards the front of the hard drive so that in a linear search, it will find it more quickly. Won't have to search the whole hard drive. But also, switching back and forth between 2 files, if we're copying 2 files, at the very least, that drive that's spinning at 7,200 RPMs won't have to seek as far to get between the 2 places it's copying stuff. We're not talking about tons and tons of distance, but over a 20-minute file copy adds up to real time. Something you were going to say?
Does that help with, like, if your hard drive was almost getting full, could it almost seem like it's bigger because if you want to store something a little bit bigger, then it actually has the room instead of...
Well, it would always have the room. Because of how it breaks stuff up and it chops a file up into a bunch of blocks, just because of how a file system works. And we'll talk about the details of it. So it wouldn't give you more room, it'll give you more performance. You'd have the same free space at the end, just that free space would be in a more convenient location from a speed perspective. Make sense? All right, your homework is to go and buy a USB drive from Evans. All right, I'll see everybody on Friday.